5. Should we just get started? Wait for Sabah.
And Arjun, yes, definitely. Once you come to one of our hackathons in the future in person, we have tons of swag to give away typically.
Sunny is there.
Hey, Sunny.
We see Sunny in the chat.
All right, we got a bunch of folks jumping on the call. Let's maybe give a couple more minutes and then we can jump in and get started.
Sure.
Any plans for the weekend, guys? Within the confines of your house?
Moving from one room to another, the usual joke.
Yeah, a lot of folks in the chat are saying, hack the North hacking. Like it's so different, I must say. Like, hack the North, like we've done this, I think maybe the last 5, 6, 7 years. And like it's so much fun to like go to Waterloo, like for students, I went to the University of Waterloo and like go to that, shawarma place that you went to when you were a student. And all the campus buildings and where you failed that math exam and like, all those things. It's so different.
Yeah, Laziz.
Waziz. Oh, if you like Waziz, okay. Best
yeah.
shawarma in Waterloo. Best shawarma in Waterloo. To me, best shawarma I've had in my life, which is Mozzing's. It's on King Street and University, I think. So good.
What's the name?
Mozzy's shawarma. Mozy.
Okay.
I used
I've
to.
heard Lozzie, that's good.
So
Yeah.
my last year, we had an apartment like a block from there, and I must have had that for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like many days. So good.
Nice.
Okay,
All right. Maybe we'll give another minute and then we can jump in.
In the meantime, I can try to share the deck so that we are set. Just so that you know, Anik, I won't be able to see the chat or you. So one of you can monitor the chat and I'll assume I'm looking good.
Yeah, as always.
Thanks, Kavi. Thanks for the confidence.
For everyone on the call, we do make the comment that Kanchan is reminiscent of a very famous boxing sport. So it's known to Deloitte employees in Canada. It's quite famous.
So can you see the deck?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay.
Saba, we're at almost the 5-minute mark. Do you think we should get started? Yep. Okay, let's jump in. Let's get started. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us today. As we were talking about, just before everyone joined, it kind of sucks that we had to do this virtually, but pandemic, this is the new way of working, so let's give this one a try. I just wanted to give a quick kind of intro to the team. So my name's Anik. I'm a leader in our business agility practice at Deloitte. And a lot of what we focus on a day-to-day is kind of the topic of this chat today, which is Agile product engineering. And more specifically, how we help some of our clients in the market understand this idea of product management, understand this idea of product centricity, and really the critical elements of product engineering to both think about interesting new digital products that change the market, but also engineer them in a way that's sustainable and can help them be competitive in the market. And these aren't just your big, massive organizations like your TD banks and CIBC banks. They range across the board from startup companies to a consumer organization, to the Lululemons of the world, to the Ubers of the world, to your big corporates as well. And so a lot of interesting concepts that we see in these startup organizations and your Silicon Bay area type organizations that we try to bring into these larger organizations to help them again compete in the market. And so with me today, I'm privileged to have a couple of my colleagues. The first is KV and the second is Kanchan. KV and Kanchan, you want to give yourself a quick introduction before we jump in?
Sure. Hi folks. My name is Krishnan. I'm a DevOps manager in Deloitte's cloud engineering practice, and I specialize in enterprise technology transformations and have extensive experience in delivery modernization, cloud transformation, and end-to-end software development lifecycle, focusing on DevOps especially, with hands-on expertise in continuous integration, continuous delivery, and infrastructure platforms. And I'm certified in public cloud providers like Azure and AWS.
Basically, our DevOps guru.
Thanks, Kavi. Hi, folks. I'm Kanchan, part of the business agility practice at Deloitte, working more closely with Anik and the things that he explained, like working with clients on their agile transformation initiatives. I'm here to bring forth my experience from 8 years in the industry, working in different delivery-oriented roles, and now into consulting. Happy to be part of this group, and we'll be sharing some of our thoughts in the talk today.
All right, awesome. So let's jump in. And one of the things I wanted to just share before we jump into this talk. So a lot of folks that are participating in Hack the North, I know that there's an actual hack that you guys are going to be putting together, an actual project over the weekend. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is different ways to think about a user persona, about a problem that we're trying to solve for, and also about how to think about a solution, the concept of a digital product. What does product management mean? What do things like MVPs mean? How do I build MVPs in a logical manner? So just like a few kind of key things that we're going to cover today. And the reason why this is important is kind of twofold. One, because it's useful information to have, especially as you're going into a hackathon, when you're trying to think about what's the minimum viable product that I can actually build over the weekend to show functionality and show I can actually solve the problem with the solution we're building. And the reason this is important is because not only will this apply to the hack, but it could apply to any of these other things you do in your extracurriculars or in your school programs. So as a quick example, we do a lot of hackathons. Almost every month, we used to be at some sort of hackathon or panel discussion or workshop like this. And I remember way back in 2015 or 16, it was one of the first hackathons I had ever been to. And it was at the University of Waterloo. It was a hackathon called Space Hacks. I was actually off campus at the Communitech Hub. And I was coaching one of the teams there about MVP design and this idea of thinking of a minimum viable product. And this hackathon was really interesting because it was sponsored by NASA. And they basically gave the team a bunch of different ideas of problems that NASA faces today. And they said, here's a bunch of different tools, techniques. Here's a bunch of Arduino kits, a bunch of different APIs that you could leverage. What can you put together to solve this problem? And I remember one of the teams we worked with, they built an MVP, which was basically a really simple mechanism for basically a mechanical arm to lift out, pick up a sample, and bring it back and run a really quick test on it. And they ended up pitching this idea. They ended up winning the hackathon. And now this team are actually full-time engineers at NASA in Houston. And so it's really interesting because you think about these hacks and you think about hey, they might not really be something big or fancy or complicated, but the thinking that goes into it and some of the concepts we're going to cover today could apply so much beyond what you're doing in this hack to solve real problems in the world. And then the second piece to pay attention to here, we're talking a lot about product management. So I know a lot of the folks on this workshop will be aspiring product engineers or aspiring product managers, whether that be in the tech scene or in larger organizations. So as you go through the talk today, consider how might I think about these things in the context of a career. How might I think about how I could use these skills to actually do something once I graduate from school with a lot of these concepts, and a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis today with our clients. So happy to have a bit of a Q&A session at the end if that'd be helpful to share some of those things. So again, we're going to do a quick bit of an introduction to our team. We'll jump right into the topic on digital products. And then a lot of the kind of mechanics of product development using MVPs and this idea of product engineering. How do we weave in concepts like DevOps to build a product and release it in a sustainable manner? So let's jump right in. Just a bit about our practice. So when you think about product management, oftentimes we think about, what is the product solution I'm trying to build? What is the persona or the feature I'm trying to actually define? And then how do I build it in an agile way and release it to the end user? And what's really interesting about our practice is that we focus a lot on this concept of business agility. And so the way I like to describe that is the idea of concept to cash, right? So a lot of organizations, they'll have trouble with building a product. So they'll have trouble with the engineering side of it. Some clients will have problems with thinking about the right thing to build for the user and prioritizing which features they want to build. And what's really cool about the type of work we do is we actually get to look across that entire spectrum, again, from the concept of what we want to do to actual cash in terms of building the product, getting into the hands of the user, and getting those learnings. And so the reason why I find this relatively interesting is, albeit my gray hair, as relatively young individuals, we get to go into these organizations who have been doing it, delivery and they've been operating in a similar way for years and years and years. And as relatively young individuals, we actually get to work with them to think differently about how they build products, how they keep the user and that customer centricity top of mind, and again, how to build things in a sustainable manner. And as relatively young people on the call as well, you might think, hey, I'm going on a co-op or I'm going in my first full-time job. Like, no one's going to listen to me. Like, why should they listen to me? Like, who's going to actually pay attention to what I have to say? And what I really like about the work we get to do is that even though we have these new ways of working, like, people at the client will actually want to listen to what you have to say, because they realize that if they don't listen to you, that in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, they might be irrelevant, right? Because they've just been operating in that same way consistently. So we really do get to push that kind of agenda at the client and disrupt how they're working. And they always kind of appreciate that fresh thinking, that outside mind, that ability to kind of rethink how they operate. A number of really neat things that we get to do. And hopefully if we have, Q&A session at the end, I'm totally happy to answer some questions from the group on what we do or the types of product types of engagements we have with our clients. So with that in mind, now you know a little bit about what we do. Let's talk a bit about how we do it with our clients. So Kanchan, if you want to go to the next slide. There we go. So what is a digital product? So oftentimes when we work with clients, they think about the world in the form of a project, right? So they have some sort of view of what they want to build. They got a project to build some sort of functionality or build some sort of platform. And so a big part of what we try to do with our clients is build this idea of product centricity, that idea of thinking about things as a product, as a kind of unit of value that drives value for an end user, versus individual pieces of work in the form of bugs or projects or features. And so there's this concept in the market of digital products as like an actual business model. So if you think of your Spotify's, your Wealthsimple, you think of Spotify, the thing that can help you stream music, right? And in that sense, you have digital products as almost the entire construct of the business, right? The Spotify actual product. Oftentimes you can think of products as like business offerings. So for example, you'll have Google Home, Google Maps, Google Fit, and you have that Google brand, but you have separate kind of products, or a spectrum of products rather, that expand across that brand. Oftentimes, when you think about the ways that we interact with various companies, you think of things like the Presto payment system, or PC Optimum, or Shell EasyPay, and these are interesting products as they're the digital front end that enhance the storefront with which you can access the rest of the network. So when you're using PC Optimum, that is one of 100 or thousands of products as part of the Loblaw group of companies, or the Weston group. But it's an interesting digital experience that pulls you in, that helps you interact with a whole set of products. And then often what we see in the market, one of the big trends is this idea of platform as a product. And so a lot of companies that we'll work with, such as Deloitte, for example, they'll have internal solutions like your CRM system where you enter customer info, or the tool you log in to account for your time for the week. And we will think about these things as products, because we want to think about the end user experience. We want to think about who is using this, what's the problem they're trying to go for, and then how do I build the right thing that actually solves the problem for the user. So all sorts of different ways to think about digital products. And so because there's all these different interpretations, a large part of what we do with our clients is help help them think with their organization, what could products look like with their organization? Are they the external facing ones that customers will actually buy and use and find value from? Or are there potentially internal products? And how do we get that product-centric mindset for these internal tools so that they're, again, thinking about that end user and building a better product overall? Kanchan, if you want to jump to the next slide. All right, so just this idea of product, it kind of makes us think, what makes a good product versus a bad product? And if we think of, any of our industry examples like Spotify or Wealthsimple, what some of the common traits that are behind these, first, that idea of customer centricity, right? When you think about the Spotify experience, right, you open it up, everything is there in front of you. When you think about Wealthsimple, what makes that product so interesting is that it's customer centric, it's easy to use, and it helps you very quickly solve a problem that you're trying to use through the app. If anyone's interested in learning more about this kind of problem-solving framework, there's a great concept out there called jobs to be done. It's by a really famous Harvard Business School professor named Clayton Christensen. And he has this concept of, what are the jobs that you would hire for to solve the product or to solve the problem you're trying to solve for? And this concept of, structuring problems as jobs, and in that concept of what would I hire for to solve that problem? The other, interesting thing about these digital products that makes them stand out for the rest is this idea of building a connection with your end user and using that connection to kind of discover different types of insights from them. And so when we think about the various apps and products that we use on a day-to-day, the ones that always stand out are the ones where you can build that connection with, where you can think about not just why I would want to use this product, but how it fits into my ecosystem and how it solves a whole host of problems around me. And again, when we think about how to build these products, one of the things that comes to mind as well is this idea of continuously adapting and growing. So with a lot of these legacy type of organizations that sometimes we'll work with, they'll build a product and it'll just sit there, and then they'll wait years and years and years to fix it, or it'll take a long time to actually evolve it. And so when you think about these digital products like the Spotifys and Wealthsimples of the world, these organizations are launching changes to that product sometimes on a minute, hour, daily basis, right? Very frequently changing the product, and you'll see new features every time sometimes when you pull the app open. And so all sorts of different, ways to consider building it, and that continuously refreshing of the product to continue that value proposition for the user. And then lastly, the idea of driving business value. So with a lot of different types of products, they'll be really fun to use and they'll be really interesting. But a lot of organizations will also look at, how does this help me generate my, boost my click rate, or how does it boost my user engagement? How does it boost my ability to just solve problems for my user and quantify what that solving looks like? So just thinking about metrics of what to consider. So and the folks that are on the call that are going to be hacking this weekend, again, something to think about here is how do I weave this like customer centricity, this idea of building a connection with my user, this idea of like a metric that matters. We have this term called one metric that matters, which is how do I quantify that value coming out of the product? All interesting things to think about when you think about your pitch, when you think about the usability and the value proposition of your product. To again help you find ways to just think differently about the problem you're solving for your user. One last point I want to bring out here, not on the slide here, which is when we think about any of these great products in the world, what we often, and a lot of folks that have done coffee chats and panel discussions with, will ask me the question of, like, how do I think about a new product? How do I come up with this great idea? Like, how do I come up with the next, Uber? And one of the examples I try to share is if you think of any of these massively digital products that we've interacted with in the last decade, your Facebooks, your Twitters, your Instagrams, these massive companies which have blown up like crazy, for the better or worse. What you realize is that when you think about how the founders of those companies thought of these products, they thought about those products because they cared about the problem they were trying to solve, right? For example, a lot of these social networking companies, their problem was how do we connect people in this world which is so spread apart. And so like they didn't, when you thought about Facebook or Twitter, like Facebook or Twitter as what it looks like today is probably the millionth or 100,000th iteration of what they actually thought about initially, right? But they cared about the problem, and then they iterated on the solution so that every time they could establish that problem solution fit, right? And so that idea of just continuing to iterate on your solution and really relentlessly focusing on the problem you're trying to solve for your user, that's what really drives innovation. So just some inspiration for the hack this weekend. A lot of people think, what should we put together? The thing I challenge you to think about is like, what problem do I think I want to solve? Because then what you'll identify is all sorts of different ways to solve it. Kanchan, you want to jump to the next one? Cool. So a couple of key points we want to talk about when we think about product, and I'm going to pass it to the team in a little bit. The first is a bit about this new mindset. So again, when we think about products, what we often see with clients is the shift from thinking about projects to thinking about products. And what that requires with a lot of our clients is this idea of just really fundamentally challenging a lot of what we think about when we think about delivering business value. So for example, what we'll often see is organizations today, when they think about prioritizing what they want to build, they'll typically look at cost as a key kind of factor, like how much does it cost to build this? And one of the three things there is this idea of customer value. How do we prioritize on what we want to build based on the value it's going to drive for the user versus how much it's going to cost? Because if we can focus on that and quantify it, there's probably a pretty good chance we can actually get some value out of it and defeat the cost that was involved in producing it. When we think about some of the other items here as outcomes, so oftentimes you'll be working with a dev team, for example, and you'll be working on a user story, and the whole idea is like get the user story done, get it done, get it done, get it done. When is it going to be done? And oftentimes what we try to challenge our clients on is thinking not about like the deliverable or the output or the story, but like the release, right? Because what we often find, and to be blunt, like oftentimes a lot of our clients, they'll try to do this agile thing, and it's great, but what it really just does is say, build shit quickly. And what we're trying to do with our clients is expand their thinking out from building quickly to building the right thing quickly, right? Because if we can build it quickly and build the right thing quickly, we will deliver that business value to our user, and will really help to, again, solve their problem with the product we're building. And again, just builds that product-centric mindset. So Kanchan, if you want to jump to the next one.
Sure.
I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Anik. So now that we have understood about like what a great digital product entails, what are the characteristics of it, and how you need to change your mindset to think about products instead of just being limited by a project. Let's talk about one of the core concepts, which is MVP. Now, the most observed definition, or sorry, the full form for MVP would be the most valuable player. And it stands true here in terms like this concept in a product development parlance is the most valuable concept. Although the full form will be somewhat different, or rather opposite. It's the minimum viable product. So what exactly is the minimum viable product? It's basically the minimum functionality that can be released to a customer wherein the maximum value is realized, or maximum possible value is realized for that particular functionality, right? Let me give you an example. That way it will be easier to consume. So in a world where, say, Domino's, let me take example of Domino's Pizza. In a world where Domino's doesn't have an online presence, they just have stores. So one fine day, they have an idea that we need to attract more customers. So one of the options to attract more customers is to reach out to people who cannot directly walk to their stores, who do not live in their vicinity. So one of the ways is to go online, right? So what could be a potential MVP for them? If we think quickly, it's basically a store wants to share its selection, or basically the product offering, with the larger audience. So in Domino's case, the most common product is pizza itself, right? So the MVP could potentially be that they build a platform wherein they can share information about all the different type of pizzas that they sell, which the users can take a look at or search for and then select for themselves. Just this discovery of the product itself becomes one of the MVP. Now, once the user, if I select a pizza, I can probably place a call to them, or I can go to their store having a certain pizza in my mind and or directly order them without wasting time in selection there. Or with different iterations of building product, we can even include other functionalities like payment and side dishes and all. So the core functionality that we are exposing, or the core minimum functionality that we can expose and test our hypothesis about our reach to a broader customer audience is is the MVP itself, right? Now, the key point here is that MVP in itself is not just a component. It has to be a end-to-end functionality. What I mean by that is, in a digital world, if you build a digital product, it will have like different layers to it, right? Just for example, if you see in the picture on the slide put forth, right? On the right side, if you see, any digital product will have like a UI interface wherein the customer interacts with it. But just the UI in itself doesn't provide any value because the business doesn't know what the customer is looking for, how many customers interacted, when did they interact, and it doesn't even provide any value to the customer in themselves because they just have a beautiful page in front of them without any functionality. So to enable that, you need to build the API layer. Like basically, to enable the functionality, you need to have the UI, you need to have the backend sorted, and you need to have all the databases figured out so that user can perform an action to derive some value, right? And that is the key concept about MVP, that it provides user with the value, and with the same time, it allows the business to test its value offering hypothesis. Does that make sense? And like one of the key benefits of using MVP is it allows the user to provide feedback before the business makes a lot of investment, right? For a small investment, you release a smaller functionality to the market and test your users whether they like the functionality or not. Whether in the example that I provided, uh, once Domino's launches its online store, they can test, okay, if they are getting enough audience or enough people coming to their stores or making purchases based from the online channel rather than offline channel. Validating that hypothesis allows them to invest more into bringing in more functionalities online. Okay. At the same time, it also gives you a platform wherein you can gauge your customers and actively ask for their feedback even. Right? Okay, so based on this quick preamble, I would say let's test your understanding of what we have delivered up until now. So we'll go into a quick exercise. Here's your customer, Lisa. The problem that she's facing is that she needs to commute from her house to her workplace. Okay, so on the right side of your screen, you would see different options available. So thinking about building a digital product for Lisa, or in this case, not so much digital, but probably a physical product, but thinking about building the product or solution basically for Lisa, which allows her to commute from her house to workplace. Can you choose a sequence here that would show an MVP or that would demonstrate the MVP approach? Okay, just to help you out, there will be 5 letters which in certain order will allow you to demonstrate an MVP approach here. Let me give you 60 seconds. Sorry, 60 minutes was allotted to us. So 60 seconds for you to try out and build a solution here. Okay.
Yeah.
Anik, I hope you are monitoring the chat. I can't see the responses coming.
We got one that came.
Okay.
We are from Aslam. We are from Arjun.
Nice. A lot of smart brains here. We are getting solutions instantly. Great. Let's see if those are the right ones.
We have one more from Brandon.
Okay, time check, 15 more seconds.
One more from
Okay.
Dhruv. Yeah.
Do we have, how many responses do we have, Kiwi? Like,
We have like 5 of them.
okay. Do you think you need more time to think about it?
Interesting question from Jenna.
What's that?
Does Lisa live in a motorcycle appropriate climate?
Thinking like a product manager. Well, let's assume she does. It's not this harsh winter there, wherever she is living.
All right, Kanchan, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So most of you would have come up with the two solutions. There are two probable solutions here. The first one, so here on the screen, you would find the two solutions. The first one is the top one, DFHBJ. And the second one is the lower configuration, which is like CAIEG. Just to okay, I'll relay the answer itself. Like the first one that you see, although shows an iterative approach to build a product, it doesn't satisfy the MVP concept because the product, as I stated earlier, each of the MVPs needs to fulfill the functionality itself or the customer requirement itself. In this case, D, like if we start with D, it doesn't fulfill the functionality itself. Like using that wheel, Lisa cannot commute to, using just that wheel, Lisa cannot commute to her workplace unless she is a amazing acrobat, gymnast, and even then it might be difficult. Even F doesn't satisfy that. H, she can if she kind of balances herself somehow on the two sidebars and navigates. So basically what I want to state is like each of these offerings do not fulfill the functionality until and unless it reaches to the stage where it is either B or J, right? So the true MVP approach would be the second option that we have on the lower side of the screen here. So Lisa can commute to her workplace using a skateboard. So that could be a potential first MVP. Now, once Lisa gets this product from you, she can have certain feedback like, hey, it's tedious to balance on a skateboard. Can you do something to help with that? Okay, fine. We have another option. We get a scooter, which is like option A, which helps her balance easily and still does the job. Like she can commute from her home house to the workplace. Again, Lisa wants to travel quicker than a scooter. So the other option or the next iteration could be a bicycle, which she can ride to her place, to her workplace. Now she wants to be more lazy, more comfort. She doesn't want to even pedal. So she gives that feedback. So the next iteration could be a motorbike, wherein she can just ride it to her workplace without putting in much physical effort. Lisa can come back with another customer feedback that, hey, I want more luxury. It's hard to balance a bike. What can we do? So the next offering could potentially be a car, which helps her balance more, is more luxurious with more functionalities. So that's how you think about like delivering MVP or delivering products in an MVP fashion. So you are satisfying the customer ask at every iteration while evolving into a better product which follows the principle of customer centricity. Does that help? Okay, I keep forgetting that I can't see or hear questions on the go. Sorry, Annie? I didn't get that.
Very contextually appropriate during a provincial lockdown.
Oh yeah. Yeah, best problem to solve for. Okay, moving forward. So what are the considerations that you need to make while designing an MVP? So the first and foremost one is like, think about the minimum functionality that provides value to the user or to the customer. What is it that customer is looking for? Like without adding a lot of bells and whistles, like you need to first think about the core problem. Once you address that, then you can think about evolving it into a more mature product, right? The second one is highest business value. Again, it's also relevant to the customer's ask, right? Unless and until you satisfy customer ask, it won't generate business value. Basically, it won't generate revenue or any kind of feedback that helps the business itself. So when you build an MVP, you need to ensure that it generates enough feedback that feeds into your iterative work model that allows you to build better product at every iteration. The third one is smallest reasonable development cost. So remember, we are building a minimum functionality, right? So investment is a very important consideration for any business, right? So before you invest millions of dollars into building a product which might not satisfy the customer, it's always good to kind of test out your hypothesis, your idea with a notional investment, and then gather feedback and ascertain if you are going in the right direction or not. Once you validate your hypothesis with the idea that you put forth in the market, then you can invest more into the product itself and scale it up, right? Uh, does that MVP provide additional knowledge about the system? Like either like the business value gain that you can make is twofold. One, it could either be external, which is from the customers, which allows direct business value in terms of revenue or more customer acquisition and so on. The other one could be internal, like if you are internally working within a system, if you need to build a prototype to test out a platform, in those cases you don't generally generate revenue. In those cases you gain more knowledge, which helps you explore more efficiency or more effective ways of solving a problem, right? So those scenarios generate knowledge directly and business value in terms of like actual revenue indirectly. Like eventually all those efficiency gains translates into you building products faster, putting it faster into the market, and thereby maximizing the time it is in the market, which often leads to increasing the sales and therefore the revenue, right? Uh, the next consideration is minimize the number of interdependencies. So remember, you are building a minimum functionality. You should ensure that it doesn't have a lot of dependencies, because with dependency comes time lag, which restricts your speed to the market, right? It's very important. Like if you're testing your hypothesis, you need to have speed. You need to put your idea there in the market as soon as possible so that you can build the next iteration, which is better and more competitive, right? And the last one is quantified amount of risks are mitigated. So it's sort of like a tie back to the dependency bit. Like dependencies and risks are something that holds the product back, right? So if the if the product iteration or the MVP doesn't have a lot of dependencies and it doesn't have a lot of risks, it's easier to put them in the market, and it's quicker to put them in the market, thereby shortening the time that it needs for us to validate the hypothesis and scale on that particular product offering. Okay, hope that's clear. Moving on, I'll hand over to KV, who will provide some insights on how you go about actually building or engineering these products, digital products. KV.
Thank you, Kanchan. Now that you hear about what's a digital product, a change in mindset from a project to a product mindset, and now that you heard what constitutes a MVP, now let's talk about the engineering practices that would make a product reliable, repeatable, and secure. So moving on to the next slide, Kanchan. Over the last 10 years, the nature of digital IT product delivery has shifted from large-scale project-based system implementations to continuous evaluation of IT systems. So the ability to roll out a product continuously will be the difference between companies that can evolve and the ones that stagnate. For every software product, for every company, a software product is a key driver or differentiation between what it innovates. It's a gateway of how new services, revenue streams, seamless customer experiences, and expansion into new markets. So today's companies must fundamentally change the way they build and deliver applications to support dynamic business needs. So for that, we need innovative engineering practices. And one of them is a DevOps, a combination of development and operations team coming together to help come and deliver a platform, a product that we call it here. So that way, companies can deliver application more faster, flexible, and operate in a more streamlined fashion. So the DevOps practice allows companies to shift from a traditional phased delivery model to continuous delivery mindset, which is made possible by integrating teams within ITs and other organizations, which apply more automated process. So the end is to get into a process where we are continuously delivering product and MVP product over a period of time, not like waiting for a full-fledged project at one time to deliver. Because by the time it comes to the market, then people will lose interest or it will stagnate and it'll never move forward. So that's why we have the foundational principles of DevOps standing on continuous integration, the way how you build your product, continuous delivery and deployment, how you're delivering to various environments, to various features, and deploying them to different customers. And then it just doesn't stop with it, but also continuously monitoring for feedback, monitoring the product, how it's performing, how are people using it, so that you're continuously getting feedback and then it evolves back into the pipeline change. So that's what we call DevOps as a combination of CI, CD, and CM. So all those together make up, those are the foundational principles of DevOps. Now, DevOps and its related principles, as you've seen earlier, Agile, which comes from the MVP background and what makes a digital product, together with continuous delivery and lean principles, they support the reality of what IT has to do with increasing speed and complexity. Customer facing digital and mobile applications which require rapid change without compromising quality in order to respond to very short feedback from very short feedback cycle from customers. Because now that you're seeing people want immediate change, and how fast can you deliver to your customers is what these engineering practices will help along with the business value that we want to deliver. So that's where enterprise systems call for more efficient and automated development and deployment approaches to keep pace with business. And DevOps supports these requirements for greater efficiency and speed in both the digital and enterprise platform, making it a key enabler in today's high velocity business environment. So in short, every digital product that you can see out in the world are applying some way or other fashion the DevOps principles of take care concepts of continuous integration, continuous delivery, deployment, and monitoring is what all future product managers that you all heard there on the call should look out for and improve your skills on that when you go out into the market. And Kanchan, if you can move on to the next slide. Yeah. Now that you're seeing what DevOps means and what its relation is to a product, now let's learn about some of our leading engineering practices that most of the companies today apply. So I've collected a list of like 20 different engineering practices that you can see here, 20 odd over here to be precise, but I'll not go through each of them in detail, but why did put that across is when we talk about these high-level foundational principles, you need to understand that each of them have different sets of practices that you need to take into account when you're delivering the product. So it's not easy to list them down and keep it there, but also you need to understand how they stitch in each one way so that you know across the whole value stream when you're developing a product, when you're putting an idea and all the way to delivering what it makes all the way. So that's why we have all these boxes which tells you from ideation to delivery, what are the practices now you need to bring in. Now, I'll not go through each one of them in detail, but I will call out under each domain what practices. I'll pick one practice and explain what the overviews and the benefit is so you can understand one. and then go back and do your homework to understand the rest. That's how you would learn it here. So DevOps as such focuses on the engineering automation practices for our development and operations and for cultural alignment with our teams, because you're working across the globe. So you need to understand these common set of principles all week. So that's how organizations would maximize the value from the DevOps principles by adopting them along with Agile principles. So that way they can suit it for the environments and go across. Now, now that we have seen there, now if you take into continuous planning, we have a practice called as value stream visibility. What does that mean? It's basically how you understand the value of the flow of work, how it flows from ideation to all the way to product. So you need to understand what are the different phases, how much time does it take, how much time is being wasted, where is our actual product flowing through, so that we have an end-to-end visibility. So that way, the benefit around that is how the product flows. You'll understand your bottlenecks and your opportunities for automation. That way, you can eliminate redundancy and wasteful processes. That's on continuous planning for value stream visibility. Now, if you take a continuous integration, you would have heard about the practice of trunk-based development, how you take your product and develop it. So trunk-based is nothing but a source code where you have one single place of truth where all your developers are collaborating and checking into a single branch called trunk. That way, all of you know where it source and how you can extract the code from it. That way, the benefit of this is to ensure that developers move fast, their fixes are more reliable, you can pick it up from one place, there is no anomalies of different sources of truth, and reduces time of delivery as you go across. So that's on continuous integration that we talked about, trunk-based development that I picked up. The next one is for continuous verification. What do you mean by continuous verification? Is the process of testing a product continuously, because the more the time you spend on developing a product, you also have to spend more the time testing it, because that's where you see the actual defects. How is it moving through the process? What are the defects that you can find early in the process? So shifting left is to get all the defects and the anomalies upfront rather than waiting at the far end delivery. Okay, that's that. And you talk about continuous deployment, you're talking about on-demand environments, how you're getting your environments on demand and moving up from there. So that we talked about on-demand environments. So basically, you're not waiting for a dev or a test environment for months and months, but using infrastructure as code to get them done then and there. That's on continuous deployment. And then for continuous monitoring, now that you have deployed, now that we talked about how you're planning, how you're integrating, how you're verifying, how you're deploying your product, we're also monitoring. So we're not just monitoring when the failure happens, but you're also continuously monitoring to see even before the failure happens that we can take up there. So that's the benefit of continuous monitoring. So now that I've told you from ideation to product delivery, the various practices, I think you can take this, learn across, and get more accustomed to what DevOps and product delivery means. So with that, I'll hand over to Anik to take it forward for the next slide.
Awesome. Yeah, just real quick. I know we've shared a number of different concepts on the call today. Kind of what does this mean to me, just to make it real for everyone on the call. So first off, you can apply this MVP approach in a lot of different things, not just large corporates or startup companies, right? When it comes to thinking about like learning a new language or working on new projects or taking on school assignments or taking on your passion project, right? This minimum viable product you can take across a number of different use cases, and is something that it can just help you with getting started on something and iterating as you go versus trying to perfect everything, because we all know a lot of people around us, including myself, are perfectionists, and it's very easy to get caught in that loop of trying to get something perfect. So just another kind of key concept there. Kanchan, if you can jump to the next slide. The other thing to think about is like if you're an aspiring product manager. So if any of the things we talked about today, from the product-centric mindset to the product engineering, the idea of minimum viable product design, if any of these types of things are interesting to you, consider like how can I use this MVP approach to perhaps think about like different ways to build what I'm trying to build to deliver value quicker, right? To lower that initial cost, to be relevant, to focus on that user, and to iterate and improve. And if we make this really, really, tangible for everyone in the call here, you all are working on hacks over the weekend. And when you think about that hack that you're building, that idea of, delivering value quickly, well, you got 48 hours and you're working virtually. So, how can you think about delivering value very quickly? And, what's the functionality and the hypothesis you want to test, right? Cost, not as important to the folks, for that are going to be hacking today, but again, this focus on the customer and the focus on relevance, right? When you think about, building these various hacks over the weekend, a big thing that, judges and anyone who's looking at product development looks at is not just what you build, but the problem that you help solve for the user. So just remember to keep that problem and that user persona in mind, because when you're pitching the idea, a lot of times, technical solutions are really great, but then the big question behind it is why should I care? What's in it for me? What does it actually matter in terms of the problem you would actually solve in a real life use case? So just some things to keep in mind there. Kanchan, if you want to go to the next slide. The other question we often get in a lot of our workshops here is, if you're like, is Deloitte hiring? So we obviously do a lot of really cool stuff like this with our clients, and so we are hiring right now if anyone is interested. So definitely check out our campus website. Super simple to remember, deloitte.ca/campus. We actually have a number of postings up right now for our intern program and also for our new grad program. That'll be expiring on I believe the 24th of January. So check that out. Check out the link. You'll see all the postings up on the site there. And definitely feel free to connect with KV, Kanchan, myself over LinkedIn. More than happy to keep the conversation going and share a bit more about what we do. So with that, I'm going to say just a huge thank you to everyone on the line for participating in the call today. Big thanks to Saba and the organizers for Hack the North for the dry run and getting things working and figuring out how we can not be unmuted and actually talk. And would love to pause in case there's any questions. Feel free to pop them in the chat window. I'm more than happy to talk through any questions you might have. Agile methodology helped a company improve their product. Yeah, totally. Kanchan, KV, do you mind if I go ahead, or do you want to share an example?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I'll share one example with the group here today. So everyone knows the credit card company, American Express, right? They have the gold card, the black card, sponsor a number of interesting sporting events, all sorts of stuff. So American Express, I actually worked with American Express about now 3-4 years ago, and we were working in New York, and we were working with the group there, and they wanted to come up with a credit card that was focused on students. So for a lot of folks that are on the call today, your kind of low interest credit card that you could get with limited credit rate to just start establishing your credit history and be able to have a credit card. So they had this idea of want to build a student Amex credit card. So they went and pitched this idea, and they got a bunch of funding to go and build up the product. So the product was the student credit card. And so we were working with them at the time, and they said, what do we think of this product? It's going to cost us, about $60 million to go and build the technology behind it, and print the cards and do the promo. Like, what do you guys think? And we said, well, like, how do we know this is actually something that the customer, the user, the persona of a student is gonna want? Like, how can we actually validate that there's going to be demand? So you're going to go spend $60 million on this product. How do you know it's actually going to be something that's going to solve a problem for the user, that someone will actually want to sign up for the card? So instead of building the product, what we did is we built a little widget up onto the Amex site, and we kind of posted it out to a number of their different partners to better engage student groups and students looking to explore financial products like credit cards. And I remember they were up on their website, and they had that widget there, and it was there for I think about 3 months, so 90 days. And at that time, they had about, I think it was over 100,000 impressions to their website over the period that clicked on the link. And the link basically said, if you're interested, put your info, share your email address with us, and more than happy to share more info about this product and perhaps share some promotional rates and perhaps sweeten the deal in terms of what you get out of the product, the customer credit card, student credit card. And so they spent about, I think it was about $20,000-$30,000 of actual effort to build the widget, to actually build that functionality to get your email. And over the 3 months that it was up on their website, they ended up having 3 people put their contact info over, I think, over 100,000 different impressions to the website. 3 people said, hey, I was interested in learning more about this product. So when we dove deeper and they did, focus groups and started talking to customers, and they went to college campuses and interviewed customers and said, what did you think about the product? Like, why do you think this happened? One of the big sentiments they got is like, students don't resonate with American Express as a brand, right? They said, like when students think of Amex, they think of, the black card that Jay-Z and Beyonce have. They don't think about the student credit card that, as a student, I can sign up for. That Amex brand was associated with like an affluent market. And so here they go. If we go back to the beginning of the story, they had a quote for $60 million to build this product, and they were just about to go gung-ho go do it. And they realized that, by building an MVP, which in this case wasn't an actual, credit card, it was just a way to explore the user group and understand, if this actually solved a problem. What they found is that the customer actually didn't want it, and so I guess they saved 59 million and change in the product they were thinking to build. So there's kind of like a real example of real client problems that, whether it's American Express or Wells Fargo or Uber or any of these other kind of consumer companies, that they face on a daily basis. Just an interesting way to think about value and understanding how to build the right product. Hopefully that answers your question, Arjun. Yeah, and good questions that you had there, Jenna, as well. Yeah, great question on the books and podcasts. So one of the number one reads that I always share with every client when I think about product is there's a book called Project to Product. For folks that are in the industry, it's a really interesting read, and it shares a lot about this kind of shift from project thinking to product thinking. Anyone that's kind of interested in this idea of product management, this idea of the build, measure, learn, lean startup is another really great book that folks probably read on the call. I'm curious, KV, Kanchan, any other books you would or podcasts you'd recommend for the group?
Like in terms of learning more about like agile way of thinking, I think Flow is a really good book. Like it really describes on what are the key aspects within the process that can be touched upon to make it more agile, make you more quicker. So that's really good book.
Yeah, and from my side, I would suggest that read a book called Project to Product by Mick Kirsten, which is particularly relevant when you want to understand about agile principles, DevOps principles, and how those mindsets works from a project to a product, mindset that Anik had earlier talked about. So I would suggest reading this book from Mick Kirsten.
2 votes for that book. Awesome. Any other questions from the group? Yeah, how can we connect on LinkedIn? Feel free to add us. You'll see our names up on the screen here. Feel free to add us on LinkedIn, and happy to chat. Looks like we have one more question from Amar. Go ahead. Good question. KV, Kanchan, you want to tackle this one before I go ahead?
Yeah, I would say like that's the right mindset. And now it really depends on what the MVP is that you're building. Maybe it takes more than 2 weeks or maybe a month, but the focus should be minimizing the time and maximizing your speed to the market with an MVP, so that you can test your hypothesis initially. Just like the example that Anik just mentioned, right? In Amex case, had they spent a year worth of time just building or thinking about the MVP, then they would have anyways invested that, if not millions of dollars, but at least the effort and the time of their employees, right? So testing the hypothesis needs to be quicker, and therefore it really depends on what the MVP you're designing, but it should be really quick, within 1 or 2 sprint work. That is like 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, you want to add something there?
Yeah, and to add on to that question regarding unpredictability, when we say it should take weeks, like what you said, like what Kanchan said, like 2 weeks for a sprint or whatever we define, even before attacking that sprint, we we do a planning session where you understand what we want to accomplish in that sprint. So it's not like you're going blindfolded into a week sprint or something and developing the product. You are taking some amount of unpredictable, but transforming to a actionable goal that you want to visualize at the end. And then when you reach the end, and if there's further more feedback and analysis, then you take that and form into a next set of version. That's where you see iPhone getting you different versions, and then software products giving you different versions along the way. That's where you tackle this along, this unpredictability.
Yeah, and the unpredictability, I think, is also like kind of the magic behind product development, right? So if we use like the iPhone example, right? I doubt anyone at Apple went and created, with the first iPhone, a roadmap of what every single iPhone after that from now and from 12, 15 years ago till now, right? They iterated on it, right? They had a view of, what here's the MVP of the product we're going to build, but they had the view of what's the next MVP. And as they went and built the MVP and tested it, they learned, right? So this whole idea of understanding the user, building what we think they're going to want, but then more importantly than anything, learning from what the user said and incorporating that into the next iteration. That's what helps you navigate that unpredictability, right? Because again, you're building something, you're testing it. As you're testing it with them, you're getting that feedback that you can incorporate into the next cycle. Again, so that you can validate your hypothesis and ensure that what you're building is actually going to solve, the actual problem or provide the right value to the user. And we've done a lot of these hackathons that were in the middle of COVID, for example, last year when it started. And when you think about a lot of these organizations who were just exploring this MVP concept earlier last year, now it's kind of the de facto standard for how you build, because we realize whether it comes to home lockdowns or the news in terms of what you're allowed to do and the social gathering limits and things like that, dynamic nature is just now what we are accustomed to. Right? Every day, every minute, news can change, things can change, and we need to be kind of rapidly adjusting to that. So it's now starting to become not just a software development concept, but also just part of how our culture works. Right? Awesome. Any other questions from the group before we wrap up? Nope. Awesome. Well, again, thanks everyone so much. Thank you so much for having us. Feel free to reach out should you have any questions, and hope a lot of what we covered today, if anything's just provoke some thought, provoke some discussion, and best of luck on the hackathon ahead. Super excited to see what comes out of it.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks so much.
Thanks, all the best.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers. Have a good evening.
Good evening.